Hello, buenas tardes, LEC community. I am Delia Perez Solorzano, your Director of High Impact Practice with the Latinx Education Collaborative. We are here tonight for a live info session with AIRR, and AIRR stands for Advocates for Immigrant Rights and Reconciliation. And our session is all about how we can support immigrant and refugee students in our school communities and beyond. At the LEC, we strive to follow our 5 values: impact, authenticity, integrity, community, and personal growth. And we know our 3 verticals are home, heart, humanity. Home, we're dedicated to creating a home for Latinx educators. Heart is inspiring the minds and hearts of our young Latinx students to become teachers. And humanity, where we celebrate and elevate and amplify the expertise and genius of our Latinx educators in school systems. Our mission, we work to increase the representation of Latinx educators in K through 12. Yes. So in a moment, I'm going to bring Carla to the screen. Let's welcome her. I will add you to the screen. There we go. Hola, Carla.
Hola, Delia. Thank you for having us here and inviting us for this to share this space together.
Yes. Tell me, introduce yourself. Say a little bit about yourself and a little bit about AIRR. Who is AIRR? What do they do?
Yes. So my name's Carla Juarez. I currently serve as the executive director for this awesome organization, and I used to be a board member 2 years before working here. So I know I just love AIRR so much, or else I wouldn't work for the organization. But the main reason, I'm an immigrant. I was born in Parral, Chihuahua, and I came to the country when I was like under 5 years old. So the immigration issue is very personal for me, which is what drives me to continue this work. And AIRR, Advocates for Immigrant Rights and Reconciliation, it started as a group of clergy and lay members, so community members. They came together, and originally it was around 2006. And this group was created to respond to the anti-immigrant narrative that was growing in the metro area here in Kansas City. And in addition to hateful media voices, and at that time, I don't know if you remember or have heard of the Minutemen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, they were trying to set up a chapter here in Kansas City. And there was no organized interfaith group in the area, to combat the anti-immigrant narrative that was going on back then, which is still very prevalent nowadays still.
Yeah.
So AIRR originally was called People of Faith for Hospitality and Justice. And, the work brought together faith leaders, faith communities to protest against anti-immigrant messages and groups, and to advocate for comprehensive immigration reform and legislation, which is what we still do nowadays. But it was also formed to support immigrants in the community. So in 2007, the organization, and we'll see some pictures later on, but the organization fundraised to pay for a huge billboard. I think they said they fundraised about $10,000 back then. And that billboard, was to communicate a message of unity and family. Officially, AIRR was named Advocates for Immigrant Rights in 2010, and we became a 501c3 in 2015. So now we have grown to be an organization that supports and trains, but also organizes the Kansas City metro area to advocate for immigrant rights together. And our mission is very much this. We do that. We educate, we support, and we organize. And we recognize, and we're currently, always working to keep families together, end that humanitarian crisis, But not just that, we also believe that no matter where people were born, everybody deserves to have a chance to a safe and dignified life. And we remain committed to empower and uplift the voices of the immigrant community, and we provide them the tools necessary to protect themselves and their families. So we want to organize along immigrant leaders so we can advocate for ourselves, right? Because who's best to know what we need than ourselves? So that's a little bit about AIR and what we do.
Thank you, Carla, for sharing your history, the story of AIR, and how it's evolved over time, and that mission statement on, educating people on immigrant issues, right, that are of the heart. I want to elevate Christy Joyce. I think she was excited here, so she's like, "Hey, da 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 da." I'm not sure.
Hi.
And she got it together, and she's like, "Hey, friends."
Hi.
Love AIR and all they do to advocate for our families. Christy, I feel your excitement. Yes. You know Christy, right? She's on our Revolución Educativa side.
Yes. Hi, Christy.
Yes. Another amazing woman. I love working alongside y'all. So in this info session, it's kind of like interview style, and we have some images to share. So we'll probably bounce around from different screens. But in your own words, let's say, Carla, why is it important for a community of educators to learn about AIR?
Because they are essentially serving our students, right? And immigration is very complex and it seems like it's ever changing, right? I think we hear something different in the news all the time. But to really be able to work with Latinx students, but also immigrants from all over the world, it is important to understand the basic process because, and I think I'll go in really deep, but sometimes you have educators or even college advisors telling you to go apply for citizenship or go apply for DACA, right? And it's not easy. So it's important for educators and every single school staff member, especially I feel like teachers and counselors or advisors that are advising you for higher education. It is important for them to learn and understand what the immigration process is and why people migrate, the different statuses that people may have. Not because someone's undocumented means that they may not qualify for something. So it's important to know the people you are serving so you can serve them better. So you can, I think like Delia, as an educator, that just being an educator is more than just showing like something on a curriculum. It's like you build relationships with students and families, right? So I feel like educators and school staff, they need to know the process to answer their own questions, but also to be better for their students, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. And I remember this billboard and that time in Kansas City. I moved here in late 2004. And I remember the organization or the attempt to organize Minutemen. There was a leader in the Wyandotte County side that was running for some kind of a board, and I'm sorry I can't remember, but it was like the rec centers. And some folks were asking for her to resign because she wanted to be a part of this Minutemen chapter, I guess. And so during that time as well, I remember the narratives and the stories that were said in the classrooms. Like I heard, as the only Latina at a middle school in Kansas City, I heard some of the most terrifying to me, right? Like language around these kids and these kids don't want to learn English, and these kids are not allowed to speak Spanish in this school. It's like, yes, they are. It's their civil liberty, it's their civil rights. And it just seemed like there needed to be some education. And I'm pretty sure folks were hungry about it, because if they knew, like, folks are winning lawsuits in California against school districts because they're telling kids not to speak Spanish. That's one example, right? But on top of that, I've also witnessed teachers telling students, nope, don't sign up for that scholarship. You don't have papers. And those are some very harmful words. And those are, it makes a huge impact on what their trajectory is and what their future goals are. They literally, you tell them that one time, and then they just want to go into this, you know what, I'm going to just work. And they're no longer going this pathway into, signing up for scholarships or whatnot.
Yeah, it's true.
And those are just two examples, Carla. I was in education for 18 years. I heard a slew of them, but it was enough to leave an impact on me, even as a first generation and an educator. Like, what we say holds so much power. And if we don't know, y'all, it's okay. So you know what? I don't know. Let me look for answers. And those of you tuning in and listening, share this with other educators. AIRR is an awesome resource. They're dedicated to supporting students and families in the KC Metro, right?
Yes, all over the Kansas City metro area.
Awesome. Did you want to talk about some of these pictures before we go on?
Yeah, well, that's the billboard that I was mentioning that back then, before it was AIRR, but the same people, they had fundraised all that money to put this billboard on the side of I-70 on the highway. So I think it stayed there for longer than a year, they said. So that's very old, but it meant a lot. It meant that people could come together to organize, lots of people support, and money. We don't talk about that. Organizing money and fundraising for good causes, this was the first of many things they did. And then our other photos is a lot of our core team members, our community. We were at a rally that the Kansas Missouri Dream Alliance put for DACA this past summer, last year. Wow, it's already been a year.
Yeah.
And we were there. Our team was there. So this is pretty recent.
That's beautiful. All right. So talk a little bit about your programs. I know you have quite a few things going on, and continue to share the importance, for our community of educators to learn what AIRR has to offer.
Yeah, we a lot of our programming is around Know Your Rights, and this is for impacted community members. And what I mean with that is immigrants, right? We want immigrants to know what their rights are. Undocumented people, documented people, everybody has rights in this country, regardless of where we come from, whether or not we're documented. So this presentation provides their rights in their home, in their vehicle, their right not to allow anybody to search them or search their belongings. So very basic things, and really what to do when you're confronted with an ICE official or even a police officer. So that's what we do. We've done these at schools. We've partnered up with the Kansas City, Kansas School District to put up one of these. I can't remember if this was earlier this year or last year, because just time doesn't exist anymore. We partnered up with them in various libraries as well, churches. So we go anywhere. Anywhere that someone asks, we'll go. And Immigration 101, like I was telling you, this organization was really founded on this. Like, the goal was to always change hearts and minds on immigration, which could take a lot of time, right? But it's all about building those relationships with community members and really being able to, aside from like the education, right? Like a come and learn. It's for us, it's about the follow-up. It's about the conversations. It's about the relationships and having a safe space for people to come and ask their questions. Like you just said, Delia, earlier, you're like, if people don't understand or they just want to know, ask. We want to create that safe space for allies in our community or just anybody wanting to know more about immigration and afraid to say the wrong thing. We want to be able to answer it. We want to be able to create a safe space to ask those questions. And so Immigration 101s have been, I think it's our oldest program up till now. Yeah, it's one of our oldest ones. And the board loves to be involved. They're a pretty active board. And sometimes we have an immigration attorney on our board. So she'll provide that legal perspective. And we have clergy on our board. They'll provide sometimes the theological perspective. What does our faith tell us to do around immigration? But not just that. We did an Immigration 101 for a library one time for staff members. And their questions was, what about in-state tuition or school tuition for immigrants and undocumented people? What is DACA? What is asylum? What is refugee status? So we answer all of those questions in that hour-and-a-half training. And then our accompaniment program, I'd say it's the most direct service thing that we have. We train the volunteers to accompany others to their, for example, ICE check-in or immigration court appointment or attorney appointment, or this is really volunteer-run program. We build community in this program, and sometimes our volunteers become friends with other community members because we're supporting one another. So that's a big one for us, the accompaniment.
Oh, that's awesome. This all sounds amazing, and I feel like you guys have done some very strategic and intentional planning around, educating folks and the different tiers. The one that's really standing out to me is the one you mentioned, like what to do when you get pulled over, or like when you're approached by an ICE officer. And I think it can go either way, whether it's police or ICE. And it can be whether you're undocumented or documented, or right. Like these are rights that I think a lot of folks are walking around not knowing. This is great. Thank you all for what you do and your reach. Look at this in the KC and Missouri, or the Kansas and Missouri area.
Yes. These are just members, not just that we serve, but also through the accompaniment program. But immigrants from all over the world really call us. We build those relationships, but not just people we serve, but also people we organize with. Because last year was our first year building a core team, and it was very intentional, very strategic to build relationships with individuals with immigrant experience, either firsthand or through their families. And like I was saying earlier, our biggest thing is to organize with immigrant people who live that immigrant experience, because again, nobody else knows what we need. Only we know, right? Only we know how to advocate. So we built this core team because we want to bring leadership opportunities to our core team. We want to bring trainings of how to organize, how to do some advocacy at the policy level. So this is just kind of shows you where a lot of our core team members from. So, Yep.
Nice. I love how you call them core team members. I caught that when you were talking about the 3 pictures. I was like, I like that. The core team members. And this was your 2021 impact.
Yes. Yeah. We did a lot of national immigration reform advocacy. We brought our core team and other leaders from partner organizations and trained them of like how to meet with their legislator, right? We met with Emmanuel Cleaver. We met with, who else? Sharice Davids, and then Senator Roy Blunt, Senator Jerry Moran. We met with with them, our leaders did, and we advocated for an immigration reform.
Mhm.
We our Know Your Rights. We conducted lots of Know Your Rights last year, and our own volunteer leaders also trained people. Safe and welcoming was one of our biggest things. That just this year, AIR had been advocating for a safe and welcoming Wyandotte for 5 years, and it finally passed in the Wyandotte Unified Government of Wyandotte County. And this will provide IDs for individuals in the county in Kansas City, Kansas, documented or not. It'll provide an ID. And AIR was just one of the, I think, 12 or 30 organizations advocating for this. And we finally won. It was a true community win.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I love this. Look at these numbers here.
Yep.
Awesome. And here you have some of the programs.
Yeah, which is what I explained at the beginning. Our accompaniment, our Know Your Rights, Immigration 101s, with the school focus. Our previous interns that just left this summer, Ruby and Yasmin, they were amazing. They created a Aaron School's focus with our Immigration 101s. So through our experiences, I was immigrant, first generation college student. So were they, the oldest of their families. So through our experiences, we kind of like, it was in a meeting. We were just talking. We were like, this happens a lot. We really need to educate college advisors and educators, because something like that happened to me. I was told by a college advisor to not do something because I was undocumented or there wasn't money for me, and similar experiences happen with not just Yasmin and Ruby, but other students in the area that are immigrants, first generation. So that's why we created this focus of the Immigration 101 in schools.
That's beautiful. I love that. And I was about to say, I can imagine all, like, if connection was visible, it would have been very electric for all three of you to be first generation and come up with something that has impacted so many folks, right? Like,
Yeah.
This is wonderful. And I know I was going back and forth, but you're going into the next question, which is great. So you heard from Yasmin and Ruby, you mentioned, and
Yeah.
then together you put together your passions, your lived experience combined, and just came up with some awesome content to share with schools and educators and community folks. Have you heard from like immigrant and refugee families in your community talk about their experiences in schools? Are you noticing, for lack of better words, I guess red flags, or like, man, we still have a lot of work to do, or are things getting better? What are you hearing?
I am still hearing a lot. There was a conversation with a student and a mother, and the mother is undocumented and the student is not, but they had a question, asking me, can my daughter get scholarships even if I'm undocumented? So there's that, filing the FAFSA and asking for parent information. All of that stuff is sensitive. When you're undocumented, you want to be, well, at least for me, growing up undocumented, I wanted to be the least visible possible. I didn't want anybody to know my name, my address. It was scary. So those questions are, for probably you and I, they're easy to answer, but for them, it was a serious question. My daughter may not be able to go to college because I'm undocumented as the parent, basically. So there's that question. So we are hearing a lot of, still a lot of uncertainty. The biggest one is, if I'm undocumented, can I get scholarships? And which is why Ruby and Yasmin, their first project at AIR as interns, they created an undocumented webinar, and it's actually on our website. It'll provide some resources for undocumented students or students who have DACA to let them know that higher education is possible, even if they are undocumented. So it's done by students for students. So it's amazing.
And yes, that's what is beautiful. I just went ahead and I put your website in the chat. So those of you watching this on a replay or on other platforms, check it out. When you talked about the parent, you reminded me, and just this like warm feeling came up in my body. I had a senior who I did not have as my, like, we had homeroom classes and KCKPS. And it was my first year with him. And I wondered, like, I would do like grade checks every so often. And we were like at square one for a long time. And so I finally brought in his parent and I talked to mom and I said, I like to know people's stories. Like, okay, what's going on? Because we're having great talks. And he's like, cool. Yes, I'm going to do this work. And then it was coming back and it was back to square one. And so the mom said, pues, ¿sabes qué, señora? Es que, pues, como él no tiene papeles y sus hermanos sí, él piensa que, pues, después de la escuela se va a ir a trabajar. Like, and I'll translate for those of you listening, but she was just like, you know what, ma'am, he's undocumented and his brothers aren't. And so he thinks that after he's done with high school, like that was it. That was his goal. Because he feels, and she felt the same. She's like, well, he's undocumented. And the parents even put that, and they agreed, they all agreed as a family unit that pues él va a trabajar. And that's it. Like, and I just said, no, señora, no. Like, and I told her, I was very honest. I said, I don't know all the details and all the legalities of this, but I know that there's another path. There's definitely opportunities and different options. Let me connect you with someone. And at the time, all I thought about was Jessica Piedra, because that's at that time who I knew was like an immigration lawyer. And I think she was just starting her practice too. Because I had gone to some of her info sessions at Rockhurst University when I was at UMKC. And I was like, we have to, and the mother, you could hear it in her voice and in her presence. You could see it, that she felt hopeful instantly. And I didn't even have the answers. I just said, no, this is not the truth. There are options. And then I shared with her some stories of some of my volleyball players that were DACA recipients, and I said, there is a different pathway. And so, but I'll be honest with you, Carla, it took a while for between the family and myself to switch that mindset in his head, because he had already been flowing in this, like, what do we want to call it? Just a passive, no, I'm going to work and that's it. And so we were like, no, there's other opportunities. And so long story short, he got his degree. He did start at KCKCC. He went into the mechanic, program and all that. But wow, right? What if there wasn't a Delia that knew a little bit? Because that's all I knew at the time was a little bit. And so that reach, thank you, Yasmin and Ruby. Thank you, Carla, again. For answering your call to this, because it's definitely still needed.
Yeah, it definitely is. And it's true. We don't want educators to become immigration experts or immigration attorneys, because it's actually wrong to give advice without being an attorney. But we don't, that's not the goal. The goal is to even know a little bit, right? To even know who to ask or who to point to or who to refer the parents to, so they can answer their questions. That's the goal. Yes. Is to not allow people to lose hope. And also, it's not just the educators in that story you're telling me, it's also the parent. The parent was convinced that the undocumented student could not reach higher education, which is another effort of ours, is to bring some education to the parents as well. But
yes,
that's another conversation.
We are partnering, coming soon to you at the LEC office in October. We're finalizing dates and times, but there's going to be a hands-on workshop with AIRR, and Carla's going to bring some folks in, right? So a part two to this, like, are there things that you wish school educators and leaders would do differently? I know you talked a little bit about, like, we don't have to be experts in the education field on immigration issues or reform, but are there things that you just, like, instead of wish, let's say, like, what possibilities, what are the possibilities, and what do you imagine schools and educators and leaders to do differently? They would do
When Ruby, Yasmin, and I were in the room, it was just like things are just coming together. We're sharing our experiences. One of our biggest hopes is to have some sort of like an hour and a half of immigration training, very basic, not boring, hands-on, engaging. We would love it for it to be part of a professional development day. That would be the biggest thing, an ideal thing, or some sort of like orientation for school, like for educators, for staff, for counselors, for advisors.
Yes.
That would be one of the biggest things. One other thing is asking questions, right? Be curious, and asking those questions.
That's beautiful. And I agree. I think it should be part of like onboarding training, whether you have a 30% immigrant population or a 5%, because one is enough to impact, and when was this, 2015, 2016-ish, like for that family to have had two other kids in high school age, so they had been here for a while, and for them to carry on this old rhetoric of, pues no tienes papeles, mijo, vas a trabajar. Like, what? So if they had their kindergarten or 8th grade teacher, whatever, like counselors, etc., just saying, hey, that would be awesome. We need about 5 Carlas. No, I'm kidding.
10 Carlas.
Or more, right? One for each state plus one for each district. No, I'm kidding. All right. Wow. Are there fees associated with all this? Like, we're talking about a lot of services here. So are there any fees?
No, no. Like for most, no. Like I tell you, all of these, the accompaniment program is fully run at a volunteer basis. We build community for that. Lots of volunteer leaders. The only thing that does in the immigration 101s, which are the ones that we're talking about, the education for educators, we do, to sustain our work, we do ask for a suggested donation, but it's not required. It's, we really, if we connect with someone, it's like, we really can't pay, but this is necessary. We'll do it because it matters to us. It matters to us that people are informed, educated, and they ask their questions. But the immigration 101s is the only thing that we ask for a donation for. The others are completely free of charge.
And the suggested donation is meant to cover, like, just programming.
Yeah, programming expenses, the staffing coordinator. It takes a staff person to coordinate all of that programming. But that's really it. And it's suggested donation of $250. But like I said, it's suggested. It's not required.
Got it. All right, I'm going to come back here for a moment. I do have one more. I know we talked a little bit about the importance, right, of like having informed educators, or at least educators that could refer them to someone. And of course, keeping in mind that your hope, right? Like your wish was that schools and educators and systems and leaders would like include this as a part of an onboard training of sort, or just like inform and train counselors and advisors, even at the higher ed level. But here at the, at the LEC, our center, our focus is, Latinx students. So how will this information, would you add anything else to what you've said? Like, how will this information help teachers who serve Latinx students specifically?
Specifically, the Immigration 101 and the immigration experience. I think, one, when you asked that question, something that came up was not all Latinx students are immigrants or undocumented, right? And there's this connection that I've seen and heard around the community, thinking that when we talk about immigrants, people think of Latinx people, Hispanics, but that's not true. So that's number one, is to know that not everybody who speaks Spanish is undocumented or an immigrant. That's one. Second, sorry, I skipped a little bit. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, no, I can hear you well.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. And how this information could benefit Latinx students is just the higher education piece. That there is even Latinx students who are United States citizens. There was that question where, can I reach higher education even if my mom is undocumented or my parents are undocumented? That is another thing, right? And like I said, we don't want people to become experts or advisors, but we would love everybody to know, every educator to know that AIR is here. And we're not the only organization, we have great connections with you, with the Kansas Missouri Dream Alliance and other organizations. If we don't have the answer, we will help you navigate to find it. So just let people know that we are here to support or answer any question with whatever we can. I mean, what do you think, Delia, as an educator and what you saw day to day? How do you think information such as the basics of immigration would benefit some students?
Yeah, for especially Latinx students, you're right. I like how you said, not every Latinx student is undocumented. I love that, because that is always an assumption that some folks make. And I'll admit, even myself, like even being Latina, I was like, hey, what part of, Latin America are your parents from? They're like, oh, my mom's from Texas. It's like, oh, snap. Okay. So like learning how to even ask that question better, right? And then some educators wonder, why some Latinos speak Spanish and some don't. And I'm like, okay, I'm not the chief officer of all Latinos experiences, but we've been here for a few generations.
Yeah.
So thank you for mentioning that. But yes, the overall information, I think it would really, when you were directing that question at me, I thought about like confidence, right? And I thought about the student that I mentioned, and then he's only one of several that I have interacted with in the last 16 years at one district. Parents being afraid, filling out the lunch form, even though like schools were pushing it because they wanted to get everybody free and they were afraid to write down any information. It's like, no, this is fine. And then the trust. So between building confidence in young people and families and trust, like those two things is, to me, it empowers them. It yields empowerment. And so then, I've seen undocumented families in Chicago who were well informed. They walked through the streets confidently. They knew their rights. They spoke in Spanish on the city buses confidently. They went into the bank and said, "Hablas español? Necesito un intérprete, por favor." You know, like it was like, yes, they knew their rights. They were informed. And so that's what comes up for me. Like we're building confidence in young people, young Latino students. We're allowing them to trust other people like us who are saying it's okay. And I don't want to say us because I am not an expert, but those of us who know a little bit or know a lot, like building that trust that it's going to be okay. You could fill out this lunch form. You're not going to be deported for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then again, Carla, we can't guarantee that either because things change.
Right. Or
the fear of, can I go to college because my mother's an immigrant? Had I not been well informed, I mean, when the former president was in office, he was saying he wanted to take away citizenship from Puerto Ricans. My mother's from Puerto Rico. So now I'm thinking like, holy crap, my mother's going to get deported. I even thought that at the time. And so, but anyway, it builds collective empowerment and understanding that things do shift and change.
Yes, it's ever changing. And, sometimes I have a hard time keeping track of all the changes that happen. It feels like every week around immigration. But the school farm lunch thing also brought something up. There was the former president, right? I don't know if you heard of the public charge. The public charge rule. And I can only talk about my experience applying for my green card. When you apply for your green card, they ask you, have you asked for any food stamps or public benefits, right? And the former president, that administration created something called like public charge that would make it a lot harder for an undocumented person to get their green card, because it also asked for example, like health insurance or like a credit score. It's bringing in the wealthy of everybody. So there was a lot of fear around communities on whether or not if their children would get free school lunches would affect them in their future immigration case. Or whether getting a box of food from a local food pantry from their local nonprofit or their church would also affect them. People were just afraid.
Yes.
And so for parents and also educators, right? Because I feel like we see educators as the teachers or people at schools as I remember being in school and my mom visiting my school, but just the highest authority of the schools, and just to have a little bit of knowledge to say, no, this is like something that will not affect you right now. It's not, to hear those updates, or for even educators to be so curious and to join a live like this and speaking about these issues, or joining our in-person one that we're going to have this fall.
Absolutely.
Look at me plugging in our workshop. But I think it matters, right? It matters if I feel like educators truly care. And if we, have that information available and provide it, it could make all the difference.
Absolutely. And it's almost like the mentality we have as educators, like one kid at a time. I wish it was more.
Yeah.
I wish it was like 100 at a time. No, I'm kidding. But yes, that goes on to say, I mean, talk a little bit about your staff and how they can join you, how they can reach out. And I'll put some links in the comments too.
Yeah, well, right now I am the only staff member because our 2 interns went on to college, and I totally forgot to add the link there, but I have it here. We are hiring for a program coordinator. We're hiring to add to our team. It's full-time. So if anybody is listening and is interested or knows anybody, I invite them to share our link. airkc.org/careers is where you would go and look at the information. So yeah, it's just me right now, but and our amazing volunteer leaders, our core team. I'm not alone. My board, but as of now, I am the only staff. But also on our website, airkc.org/get involved. People can fill out a form to get involved in our work if you want to volunteer with us. We are always looking to grow our community of leaders, volunteers, anybody who wishes to get involved in the work that we do. And there are lots of opportunities to become a trainer, a volunteer trainer with us around Know Your Rights, tabling events, the planning, all of those opportunities are available for people. Our accompaniment program, of course, it is the largest volunteer-run program at AIR currently. And, there's lots of opportunity for people to lead in that group as well. We need a lot of support in that group because I've always mentioned we are not like a resettlement agency, but we do provide a lot of support for asylum seekers and undocumented people looking for resources as simple as, hey, I saw a house for rent here, and a volunteer will take them to the place. And it's just a community. We're building a community of support. So that's our biggest program that requires volunteers at the moment. And our core team is a core team of immigrant leaders, first generation individuals who have had the immigrant experience firsthand, secondhand, and would like to come and lead the organization with us. Then we always welcome them too. And collaborations just like this one with LEC and AIR.
I'm looking at this and my heart wants to go to the core team, but you and I talked about earlier, like adding things to our plate. So if someone like you've heard, you and I have connected outside. So if I'm interested in core team, I fill out the form and I can join a team. And see, when you say a team, I feel like, okay, the work is going to be kind of, spread out. So it's not like spreading one person thin. What would be something that I could get involved in?
So yeah, that's a good question. Within our core team, we have 3 different areas of work, or like 3 different sub teams. And one of them is the AIR in Schools focus. So it's bringing these presentations and coordinating, building those connections and relationships with educators and school districts to bring this training into the schools for educators. So that's one. And not just with educators, but also with students. There was a student focus group done earlier this year, because this group is also building like a toolkit made by students for students. And so that's a lot of the work. There's a team, the accompaniment team is also within the core team. So leaders from that team coordinate other trainings, train other volunteers, mobilize other volunteers. And then we have our huge one, which is Kansas, it's called Kansas Policy Advocacy. So we are working to build lots of, people power and bringing more people into our work. So we have done a little bit of planning around that, and we are partnering with other teams from other organizations to do that.
I love this, Carla. You're talking about teams and that collaboration, building a community. My goodness, this is great. I love it.
Yeah, it does really take a village.
It does. It definitely does. How can folks reach out to y'all? So you have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, no TikTok, huh?
No TikTok. No, not yet.
Not yet. Oh. So yes, how can folks contact you? You have a phone number here. I'm going to put that in the chat as well as you talk.
Okay. Yeah. This is how you could contact our main forums. We are a lot more active on Facebook still. I know it's a little bit old school. People are most active right now here is Instagram and TikTok. Is that right?
Yes, it is. It's Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, right? And then there's us, like Facebook, LinkedIn. No,
Yeah, that's me. Facebook.
MySpace. No. Have you had a MySpace?
I had a MySpace. Yes, I did. I don't know what happened to it. I don't think I could even remember my password. But our phone number is 913-229-6183. And then if they want to reach me directly, my email is Carla with the Karla, with the same domain at airkc.org. People could feel free to reach out. And if people want to get involved, it's airkc.org/get involved and fill out the form. And someone, most likely me, will be in contact with them to have a conversation about ways that they can get involved.
I like that. You're like, most likely me. But
yes, it is.
You are hiring. You are hiring, and the link, if you're interested in knowing more about the position, it's a program coordinator position. It is in the chat. If you're on Facebook or YouTube, I'm sorry, I don't think these things get posted in LinkedIn, so I'll flash it on the screen. It's airkc.org/careers.html program coordinator position. That way you can support this work.
Yes.
Carla, this was amazing. Thank you so much for joining this info session and giving us a wealth of knowledge. I learned something new today. Definitely looking into that core team and seeing how I could continue to collaborate on the ground. And yes, we will have a workshop coming up for educators, community folks, anybody who wants to join us in October. Look out for the save the date in the newsletter and our social media platforms. If you're tuning in or watching later, please take a survey. Tell us how we could do better. Your feedback is very, very precious to us because we are here to work alongside you all and make sure that we're sharing content that's relevant for our LEC community. And make sure you follow us on our platforms. All right, Carla, anything else for the people before we go?
No, just reach out if you have any questions or need to schedule a Know Your Rights with your community, anything, reach out. We're here. And thank you, Delia. I really appreciate you and the LEC team for providing this space.
No, thank you. Thank you for reaching out, and shout out to Noemi Tolentino too, right? She's like, I have to connect you with Carla Juarez. I was like, let's do it. So thank you. And everything that Carla said, there's a lot of info in the comments. So make sure you click on those links. Take care, y'all.
Bye.
We're sitting there like in the arena in Las Vegas.
When I started this LEC community,